This tank has been in my shop for a couple years. I got it from Phil Rokas, who thought of me when he pulled this out of a laundromat because he knew that this shop needs a lot of air. It needs a lot of air because I have a power hammer, a Chambersburg general utility hammer. It's an air hog. It takes 90 CFM at 100 PSI, and not every compressor can make that. Besides that, the power hammer needs a big gulp of air when it first kicks in, before the compressor catches up, and so it has an air storage requirement pretty close to the hammer to provide the initial impacts. Well, 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when I put that power hammer in the shop, I built a storage vessel and buried it under the floor of my shop. I welded it together out of 12-inch pipe and I buried it, and I thought I did a good thing. But I've been getting nervous. That tank that I built is right over here next to the power hammer. Let me show you. It's buried under the ground, a couple feet deep. It's 12 inches in diameter, 12 feet long. I welded half-inch plate on the ends of it. I put a drain in it. I don't think I have air. Yeah, there's no air in it. And I come up out of the tank and into the power hammer right here with this 1.5-inch pipe. It provides the initial big gulps that the hammer needs while the compressor is catching up. Well, as I've been thinking about this, and more importantly, as some of you have been warning me, I've realized that I've buried a bomb under the floor of my shop. And it might fail slowly and just leak, or it might fail in 1 second and really cause a problem here for me, and more importantly, for my grandkids or friends who are in the shop. So it's time to change that. So I've checked with every expert that I can talk to, including a friend of mine who certifies boilers on locomotives. We've checked the wall thickness, we've checked the tensile strength on the tank itself, we've checked the volume and the pressures and the use I'm going to put it to, and this beautiful thing is going to solve the problems. Now I am taking out just a little more insurance, and I'm going to lay up a couple cinder block, concrete block, blast walls just outside the shop to sort of protect the shop in case the unthinkable should happen. But the unthinkable is not going to happen. We're upgrading the air, we're going to feed the power hammer, and we're going to run shop air to 4 or 5 different ports throughout the shop just so I can air up tires, run die grinders, blow sawdust off of table saws, and anything else that compressed air would be really handy for, really anytime I need it. So let me give you the lay of the land, okay? Here's the sacrete that I'm going to use to pour the little slab that tank's going to sit on. Here's 3 bags of mortar mix that I'm going to use to lay up some block walls on 2 sides. And this whole thing is going to be set up right outside the shop wall. This is the compressor that makes the air for the power hammer. Atlas Copco. I just had to do some work on the switch. I got that going. This is where the air comes out. And instead of going into the storage vessel under the ground, it's going to go into the storage vessel right here against the wall of the shop. This is where that red tank's going to sit. It's going to sit on a little concrete pad right here. It's going to receive the air and do its good work. Let's get going. With the concrete in, the rebar dowels in and in the right place, luckily, it's time for me to lay some block. some 6-inch CMU. I'm putting up a little blast wall here. You know, I already talked about that. I'm going to protect my people from any air mishap. Not that any's going to happen. But for the rest of the day, I'm going to be struggling along doing something that I'm really no good at. But I'm not going to let that stop me. And you shouldn't let that stop you either. I mean, one good way to learn to do something is to simply start doing it. And by the time you're done, you know, you just might be pretty good at it. And after 4 or 5 shots at that sort of possible failure and possible marginal success, you might be able to represent yourself as having added that skill to your toolkit. So here we go. And please understand if I don't show too close what it is that I actually produce here when I do my block layer impersonation. One of the problems with doing something seldom and poorly is that when you finally decide to do it again, you can't find your gear. And I couldn't find a striker, you know, a mason's thumb. But I just realized that I have just stumbled across perhaps the only truly worthwhile aspect of a round concrete stake that is better than a square concrete stake, and that is you can strike a brick joint with a round stake, but don't try it with a square one. I forgot to mention that what I'm really doing here is practicing laying some block, because I'm going to be doing a project here in the next 2 or 3 months for my daughter and her family, and I think I'm going to lay up just a little bitty short stem wall on there out of block. And as you have figured out by now, it's not my strong suit, and so I figured I needed a little practice somewhere where only the chickens and I would get a look at it, because when I get to that, it needs to be a little better product. So mostly this is just dress rehearsal. So this was the pressure relief valve that was installed when this was functioning as a water tank. 125 psi to match the water tank rating of the tank. Like I mentioned, I've had it analyzed by an engineer, checked the wall thickness, visually inspected the welds, and this thing would be safe up to 211 psi with a 4-to-1 safety margin, which means there's no way that my compressor which is going to be shutting off at 135 psi and then holding at about 125. There's no way that's any kind of a safety factor in my shop at all. Something tells me that a real plumber wouldn't use a come-along on the end of a pipe wrench to twist an elbow out of the top of a tank, restraining it with his drill press. But let's just see what happens, should we? There it goes. Nothing to it. Okay, so I've got one more little half-inch pipe nipple to pull out of the side of this, and then it'll be ready to order some plugs and some reducers and some elbows and get this thing set in place pretty soon. Phil tells me this is the sauce. I've had it on the shelf for quite a while. It's separated just a little, but it seems to reconstitute. I think it'll hold the air in. Well, we made it back here. I mean, it was kind of a tight fit. I'm gonna have to roll that around to get the openings oriented in the right direction and then plumb it in. But we're much, much closer to having our blacksmith shop back online than we were just, this morning, actually. So I'm starting phase 2 of the air system in the shop. Phase 1 was getting big air to the power hammer. That is virtually complete. Phase 2 is running PEX to 3 or 4 locations in the shop, so I have small air for air tools kind of scattered wherever I need to do work in the future, including the wood shop. So I've got Phil Rokas's clamp, I've got a box of fittings. Let's see if I can solve this little plumbing puzzle. Had Teflon tape. I'm going from brass to black iron. I've been told I don't need to seal that up, that the brass will seal it up. But I'm going right over the top of those threads with some Teflon tape. Thread on the fitting, push on the PEX. We're just about done over here in this corner. It's in. It was a lot of work, but it's a big improvement. I've got a lot more air right up close to the power hammer that it will just keep a real steady airstream for that, no matter how big my forgings are or how much I'm working. Besides that, behind a blast wall, you know, it's just a better thing. The pressure relief valve up there is rated to discharge way more air than is possible for this compressor to make. That's good. I have an automatic venting mechanism here, and I've got it set so that about every 30 minutes it vents for about 30 seconds. That'll keep the inside of this tank nice and dry. I just want to thank you guys for all the good ideas that you gave me when I explained to you that I had a bomb pressure vessel under the floor of my shop. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it just wasn't worth it. Because my grandkids are getting bigger now. They're big enough to start wanting to blacksmith. And it would be a hard thing to live with if, due to my own sort of sloth, there would have been something awful happen with a homemade pressure vessel. So thanks for the good intel on that. I'm delighted that it's done, and I'm looking forward to running a lot of air through this thing. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman. Thank you for your good ideas, and keep up the good work.